I do apologise for my spin dryer working in background, but hey ho. I'm sure you've missed my voice during lockdown. Hope you're all staying safe out there, everybody. First video then, little coursework workshop. Purpose and introduction, the first section of, well, what is in effect your write-up, I guess, worth 12 marks out of 70. And every mark in your coursework is like gold dust, because it's something that you can control before you go into an exam where there's uncontrollable factors. And just to give you a bit of an idea, if there are 29 or 30 marks between grade boundaries out of 350, say for instance 9 to 10% between boundaries maybe, and someone gets 6 on their introduction and another student gets 12, then just on that one section, what's like a quarter of a grade, almost, roughly. My maths isn't brilliant, but right, so yeah, every mark, control the controllables, and hopefully you'll get a bit of a buffer in terms of when you go for exam. So anyway, enough of that nonsense, me waffling on. Right then, the steps of geographical inquiry. Where are we? Where should we be at this point? Well, first step, introduction and planning. And really, it probably should be the other way around. Planning and then introduction, I think of it. Then we design as methodology after that. So you're going to know exactly where you're going, what your sampling strategy is, frequency and timings of your sampling strategy. Consider any ethical dimensions before you even go out into the field and collect your data. Then you collect it, you come back, and you start to analyse and present it appropriately, and then you can draw conclusions and evaluate your project. Alright. Right, where should we be up to then at this stage? Clearly we're in this purple box here. So, most of you, by the time before you get to your intro, should have done this or some variation of this. You're going to have had initial ideas on what you're interested in, what theory, what topic you want to kind of investigate, what geography you're interested in. Some of you might have kind of done it the other way around and got a study site or location and then thought, well, what geography can I investigate from this location? So if any of you are out there or struggling, to come up with kind of a project, there's 2 ways of doing it. 1, get the location and think about the geography. 2 is get the geography and then think of the location, but you're going to need both. Alright, then before you come up with any questions, you're going to need to research the geography and what's happening in your study site or location. Just collect a load of different and wide variety of research sources. Collect all the web links, collect the bits of the textbooks, whatever it is, stick them on a page, and sort of do a bit of sifting, your skim reading at this point. What's useful and you're going to keep on the list, and what's not useful and it's a load of tosh, yeah, and you're going to get rid of that. So you sort of skim read, you're getting a feel for the geography in your study site or sites. Then you're going to look at a map, or you should have looked at a map during this process, even if it's familiar and it's on your doorstep. So even if you've grown up in your local neighbourhood or town and you're going to investigate something there, still get a map, and a good map as well. Key terms, list of key terms and theory connected to the topic and the study site, very important, and we'll talk about the importance of them in a bit. And that's before you even start to design your aim, which should be quite broad but manageable, or the title, your sub-questions or your research questions, and your hypothesis. And I've just put a little note saying logic with an exclamation mark. The aim or the title should leave some scope for assessment and evaluation. So to what extent questions are good? To what extent does something change between site X and place Y, for instance. To what extent has something been successful you're bringing in your evaluation? To what extent does something change along a transect, for instance? So you're showing change over space. You could also do a project on change over time, so how something's changed from the past to the present. Yeah, but just a bit of a word of warning: if you aim all your titles too narrow, then you're going to come into problems. If it's too broad, you're also going to come into problems as well, because it's not manageable in terms of either scale or context or whatever it is you're investigating. Your sub-questions should be a little bit more kind of scaled down or a bit more precise, and your sub-questions should help you sort of shed light on or investigate the broad title. Then finally, we've got simple testable hypothesis. And once you've done all that, you fill in a proposal form or your official kind of proposal form for the exam board. You hand it into your teacher, and then they either approve it and make comments, or they'll ask you to tweak a few things if they think they can't hit, if you can't hit the criteria in their opinion. Typical reasons for why people might not get projects approved is if they're too big and totally unmanageable, like, let's evaluate the impact of migration in Sheffield or in Newcastle or in London. It's far too big scale-wise to do it. So you can get them fail for that. If they're too narrow, at the opposite end of the spectrum, so famous GCSE style projects of how does a river sort of change as you move from the source and downstream. That's a little bit too narrow. So a basic coastal projects, like what are the impacted groins on beach profile, again, you've got one strand to go at, so you need to put a lot of thought into it at this point. And your teacher approves it, and we're off to be writing the introduction. So first thing I want to show you, because it's always good to have one eye on this before you do anything, is the mark bands or assessment criteria. And for this section, for your introduction, you've got level 1, level 2 and level 3. If you want to look at level 1 and level 2 in your own time, then off you go. But level 3, 9 to 12 marks. There's 3 marks for AO1, 3 marks for AO2, 3 marks for AO3. Right? So what is the examiner looking for? Accurate and relevant geographical knowledge and understanding of location, theory and comparative context. So that's why a list of key terms before you set off, and put your finger on the geography, what you're going to be investigating. Remember, we are geographers. We're going to be referring to the geography, theory and key terms throughout. Applies understanding to find coherent and relevant links between the investigation's context and the broader geographical context. Now, that could be in terms of historical context, so setting your project in terms of what geography was there before in your study site, what changes has there been. So this is where your research comes in. If you're doing a coast project and the coastline is retreating or eroding, that's a process, what's happening, so you can maybe pull out some historical data to sort of prove how fast or how much of a problem it is, for instance. If you're doing regeneration, well, why was that regeneration needed? What's happened in the past that's led to the point where it was needed, and then what impacts has it had, or how successful has it been afterwards? You need a bit of history, so historical context. I also think that word broader context. You're going to set your study site or your location in terms of a wider geographical context as well. You know, no place is in isolation, or very few places are in isolation. They're near something else. If you're looking at parts of a town, where is that ward or that part of a town in relation to the CBD? Where is the regeneration project in relation to the city centre, in relation to transport links, accessibility, national parks, all that kind of stuff. So again, your research and maps and data are going to come in handy. And then thirdly, based on that research and data, wide range of relevant geographical sources. All right, so if they're not relevant and you can't get anything relevant out of a source, then you should have binned it at the earlier stage, like on the previous slide. And don't feel that you have to use all of the information from all of the sources. That is not going to happen. All right. Be really selective. If you get a source what gives you one really relevant, appropriate, crucial bit of data, and you just use that piece, that's fine. Other sources you might take a bit more. All right, so you need to kind of critically engage with the stuff that you're reading when you're writing your intros, and not just get into the habit of copy and pasting chunks of stuff you've found online. It's not going to work. All right, and then we use that data and that research and the theory and the context and the knowledge to justify your project. Basically, what geography is it that you're investigating? Yep. This bit, the last bit, appropriate framework for investigation at a manageable scale. A lot of this will come in, obviously, your planning of your project before it gets approved. If it's not at a manageable scale, it shouldn't get approved anyway. Your teacher shouldn't approve it. Framework can also link into your methodology as well, in terms of your sampling size strategies. How sound a project is it from scratch? Yeah. So is it logically structured and comprehensive? Comprehensive, it's not too narrow. Manageable scale, it's not too big. Logically structured, that's referring to what I was talking about earlier, where oopsie daisy, I hate when that happens. Oh, right, that's linking to what I was saying earlier, where you've got your broad aim or title, and then your smaller sub-questions that are more kind of tightly focused, and your hypothesis, which is simple statements, feed in and shed light on the bigger aim. Yep. If there's any if these aren't connected well to your aim, and you've got an hypothesis that just doesn't make sense, and it's like, well, why is that hypothesis or sub-question? Why does it link to your aim? Then, it's not an appropriate framework. That's how I assess that anyway from Mark Scheme. Right then, I've gone on for a bit there, haven't I? 13 minutes. Right, here we go. So, right, and if I were to give, personally when I mark these in previous years, what do the good ones have? What gets full marks? Well, they build a focus on their investigation, and to do that, they refer to theory, they use key terms, they might apply that theory using a model, alright? So that's the geography bit, yeah? And they combine that or integrate it with research from a wide variety of appropriate and relevant sources, any data that's selected, and that doesn't mean you are going to include every bit of data from the ONS or NOMIS web. That's not needed. Select it, yeah? Don't be blasting me at this point with tables and tables of data. That's not good, and it doesn't mean you get any more marks. So select it, be selective, combine that with the theory and the key terms to justify and build a focus on your aim, your title, and your sub-questions. Alright? Less successful ones that don't hit level 3, they go one way or the other, really, so they're unbalanced. So some have only got the theory and not much on the actual study site or location or research. They've kind of just like what geography's there, like a bit of an essay, and they don't have research. Or the other approach, which is lazy and it stands out like a sore thumb, is there's not much theory, key terms, and references to any models, and it's just copy and pasted nonsense off the internet, basically. Either one of them is not good. You want to get a balance between both, throughout your introduction, all right? And it's tricky. It takes time. It takes a lot of thought. It takes planning. It takes rejigging as you go. Contents-wise, you might want to make a note of this. What do good introductions have in them? Some students like to sub-ed the different parts, if you like I'm going to go through in a minute. They're all numbered. Some students like to not do it in this order. So, for instance, if they struggle kicking off with a justified aim, which they should have, so that's a good starting point, to be honest with you. Just write your title and then you're off and running. Some like to do the next bit first and start researching background information of the location. Whichever, it's up to you, it's your project. But what are good ones? What do they typically have? Well, a justified aim, all right, or title. Now, when you say justified, well, this is where you bring in maybe a bit of research and data, and few crucial key terms. You might even define some crucial key terms from the title to get you started. And whenever we are defining key terms, it's very lazy to use Wikipedia. Use a textbook, use a dictionary of geography. If I'm seeing dozens and dozens of Wikipedia, I'm just like, oh my days. Your A-level geographers, so act accordingly. Then this manageable and logical framework that we talked about, your key questions and your hypothesis should be wrote out. And again, knit in your geography. How do these key questions help you with that aim? Quick example, if you're doing a course project and you're looking at the success or how successful a management strategy is at location X, then what different strands does that lead to when you say the word success? It could be accessibility for different stakeholders. It could be perceptions of risk from different people. It could be impact on the environment, impact on physical processes. So you're going to have different strands that feed into that. If you're doing a regeneration project, you could structure it around economic, social, environmental, for instance, but there should be some logic, right? This is where you sort of justify it, You don't need to waffle on for ages, though, with this bit. Bit 4, this is where you start to get your teeth into it a little bit. Right, so background information and details of locations. So the physical and human, economic, historical, social geography, cultural geography that's relevant to your investigation. Examples, but don't be restricted to these. What are the physical characteristics of the site? So if you're doing glaciation or coasts, you might need to be referring to some of these things. Altitude, upland, lowland, urban, rural, coastal. How is it situated in relationship to its surroundings? What's it near? What's accessibility like in terms of international airports, train stations, motorways, that sort of thing. How close is it to the nearest cities? But make sure it's kind of relevant to what you're doing. You might think about in terms of administrative regions. How is it managed by the local? Well, who is the local council? Is it part of a national park or not? If you're doing like more rural-based projects. If it's a coastal project, then what SMP is it part of? Is it part of an SMP? Who's the local council? That sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I could go on there, yeah, because every project's different. They were just a few ideas. This is the point to bring in your maps, all right? And there's nothing better than seeing a well-chosen, carefully selected, clear map at the right scale that is annotated well, all right? It does a lot of the work for you. So what things might you want to annotate it with? Anything that's relevant to your project. If you're doing regeneration, it could be economic data, for instance. Research, context. You could, pull out a bit of theory as well, key terms. So yeah, I mean, that guidance is vague because it depends on what project you're doing. Some people, we're always aware of scale as geographers. Some people might want several maps, so they might want one map that's kind of zoomed in and that's kind of site specific, and then they might want to zoom out to help them set it in broader context with the surroundings. Again, that's your decision. Yeah. Coastal projects typically have more than one map. You will have a map of the town that you're studying, where the management is, and you'll annotate that, and then you'll kind of zoom out, if you like, and show it as part of a wider literal cell. All right, but again, all decisions you've got to make. Linked into that is we've got the physical and human geography, the background details that we should have annotated on a map to set the scene for the examiner. Assume that the examiner doesn't even know where your study site is. They know nothing about it. Yeah, you could be getting a moderator that lives in the Philippines, that lives in Taiwan, Australia, moderating your coursework. Do not assume that they know where the Olympic Park is in London. They might not. Do not assume that they know where St Ives is, for instance. If you're doing something at St Ives, whatever, you need to paint a picture for them and build a focus on your project. Yeah. Anyway, next bit, which should be 5, a bit of a typo, is discussion of the issue and the problem. Now, most titles will relate to always will relate to an issue or a geographical problem. All right. So again, you're going to be explaining the geography and the context behind why you're doing your project. Yep. If it's a regeneration-based project, why was regeneration needed? Why did they do it in the first place? That takes you back in history, and that needs you to pull out the socio-economic geography. Yep. And maybe link to a spiral of decline model. If you're doing a coast project, why did they put the management there in the first place? Well, they've got risks of rising sea levels, erosion and flooding, soft lithology, for instance. Obvious. So, yeah. Issue and problem. Excuse me. At this point, it's useful to bring in some kind of model and apply your project to that model. Alright? So obviously reference where you've got the model from. You may wish to annotate the different stages of the model, and if you can link your study site or what's happened at your study site to different parts of a model, then that's good. You can use data and research to annotate the model as well. So you're bringing the two together. You're bringing a model which is theory, and then you're combining it with your study site or your location. Popular ones, depending on what you're doing: regeneration, spiral of decline model's perfect. If you're doing course, it could be Valentin's or literal cell model. Again, it's theory. You've got to apply what's happening in your location to that model. Yeah. If you're doing an urban-based project, urban structure, parts of a city, well, where is your ward or housing estate in set in that city? Whereabouts it's set? What part of the city is it in? You've got Mann's model of urban structure. Older ones are like Burgess, Yeah, there's lots of them, so you need to choose one. Okay, that's it. Tips. Again, main one. Are you doing this? Are you combining theory, key terms, models with your research, your data from a wide variety of sources? Yeah, it's very unlikely that your wide variety of sources will have the key terms and the theory in it. All right. For instance, local newspapers will have will kind of lead or set the issue, describe the issue. They won't be using geographic terminology. That's your job. Yep, that's just one silly example. Tips and good practice. At this point, whenever you use or make reference to either a textbook, a journal, a website, a newspaper, a council website, SMPs for your coastal stuff, you're going to need to briefly, in brackets, reference it. If you can, and you've been taught using the Harvard style, that's a bonus at this point. But if not, that can come later. But just put a little marker in or a footnote, where you've got things from. Because if you try and do it at the end of the project, you get in a tangle because you can't remember where you've got stuff from. Especially if you've used a wide variety of sources and you might have 10, 12, 15, 20. How are you going to remember where you've got the info from in that paragraph? Yeah. So, little tips. If you're using a textbook, just get the surname of the textbook and the year it was published, or if you don't know the year for the minute, just put the surname and just put Smith Textbook, for instance. You can edit it later. If it's an official website like Nomis Web or the DEFRA website, for now, something like that will do. nomisweb.com. You don't need the full URL. Yeah, so the full URL that's like 8 million characters long, you don't need that at this stage. Just put Nomis Web. It's just a marker so you can see where you've got stuff from. Yeah, students that don't follow this end up in a tangle later on because they've got a very good introduction that's got all the elements in it and it's perfect and they've hit all the criteria, but unfortunately they don't know where they've got it from. Right, okie pokey, that's it. See you later. Good luck.